planet.
Okay.
Oh shit, that goes to the planet.
So good morning, everyone. Today's Learning Thursday, new term, is going to be on Azure Resource Templates. And so I am Chris Woolham. You all know me, hopefully, or you will know me. And I'm managing consultant here at Technosis. So kind of the overview of what I wanted to go over is, just we're going to have an overview first, then talk a little bit about the terminology, go over some of the benefits of using Azure Resource Templates, and then there's some guidance from Microsoft where they specifically talk about what are the best practices, how do you maximize the efficiency of creating these templates. We'll look at how the templates are configured, and then we'll go into a real demo that we did to deploy one of our new Helix environments.
Do you want us to wait till the end to ask questions?
No, go ahead and ask questions in line.
Okay.
That way.
Cut us off if we're like taking up too much time or something like that.
No, it's fine. We have an hour, and I'd rather the questions get asked when they're fresh.
Thank you for answering my question.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Full meta.
So the overview. So Azure Resource Manager, what it does is it enables you to work with your resources in your solution as a group. Earlier, when Azure was deployed, all the resources were kind of separated out, and you just had them in one big giant list, and they were hard to manage. Especially like if you wanted to deploy or delete all the resources related to something specific, you had to go through, find them all, delete them all. It was really a big pain. So now you can group those together in resource groups. So yeah, you can deploy, update, or delete all of the resources for your solution in a single operation. And you use a template for deployment, and that template can work for different environments such as testing, staging, and production.
Are there other grouping strategies besides environment?
Yeah, so there's a few different strategies. It depends on, is everything internal? How big is your company? There's, at the highest level, you start with the subscription. So you could have multiple subscriptions for a company, say one for engineering, one for marketing, stuff like that. Then it goes down to resource groups that if you have a small company, you're going to start, the engineering and marketing would be at that level, and you deploy resources for those resource groups. For larger companies, it might be per application or per application group, whatever's needed to host that. It just depends on, size, your need. At Technosis, we currently have 4 subscriptions, and then some of the subscriptions have multiple resource groups in them.
And a location as well? Location?
So locations are actually at the resource group level. Subscriptions can span the entire world.
Got it.
So next we'll talk a little bit about terminology. So a resource is any manageable item through Azure. Some of the common resources are virtual machines, storage accounts, web apps, databases, and virtual networks. But there's a lot more. Everything new that Microsoft adds to Azure is deployed using Resource Manager. Some of the previous way that it was done was through PowerShell. A good example of this is like a cloud app. Or Cloud Worker, which had a VM backing it. You currently can't deploy that with resource templates. They're deprecated, so they're not going to migrate them over. So that's still like a manual operation. You use PowerShell to deploy it. So you could have a much lengthier script to deploy an environment with that versus, a simple template and fire and go. So next thing, a resource group, a container that holds related resources for an application. So this can include all the resources for an application or only resources you want to group together. You decide how you want to allocate resources to resource groups based on whatever makes most sense for your organization. So
you might have resources in a resource group that span applications.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that preferred?
It depends. So we just created a PDF generation service. That's in its own resource group, but it's going to be used by a bunch of our applications.
Got it.
So
worker role?
It is a worker role. Yeah.
I mean, that makes sense. But I would say the PDF generation service is like a separate application almost. Like it's a service that other applications use.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. That like
the logical grouping or the resource grouping isn't a barrier grouping. It's just simply a logical grouping for the resources so that you can examine them as a wholesale item.
Yeah. And you can view
everything else can talk to it.
Yes.
Right.
And you can view costs specific to a resource group as well.
Can you do like metering? Let's say you have an external API, you have customers.
Yeah.
Multiple, you can connect billing somehow to that?
Well,
or is that your own?
Yes.
If you did that, we're working with that API management over in CIM land, and that's actually really cool. And you can do metering for your API that way. Have you messed around with API management?
No.
I will show it to you later if you're interested. But you
I want to see.
Yeah, you can
do
do
a learning Thursday on it.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe, but you can actually create dev keys. You can sign people up, do subscriptions to specific APIs, and then do metering to that. Yeah, and then you hook up Azure AD to it, so that it's passed through. If both your application and API management use the same Azure AD instance, when you auth to get in through API management, that same token will actually get passed through to your application. Everything should just work transparently.
Nice.
Very, very cool.
Okay, we should build one.
Cool.
Yeah.
I already have a service.
But anyways, sorry.
It adds.
Get focused.
Yes, sorry. Back on track.
Back on track.
Yes.
We'll bookmark that one.
Yeah.
We'll put you on the list.
That's more Jay's thing, anyways.
Okay, so last one, resource providers. So it's a service that supplies resources you can deploy and manage the resource manager. So you'll see this in the demo, but each of these resource providers provide operations for working with templates. So some of the common ones are Microsoft.compute, which provides you virtual machine storage, which supplies you storage account resources, and Microsoft.web, which supplies resources related to web apps. So we'll see that a bit more in the demo. I'll go into that. So some of the benefits of these templates is you can deploy, manage, and monitor all of the resources for your solution as a group rather than managing them individually. You can repeatedly deploy your solution throughout the development lifecycle and have confidence that your resources are deployed in a consistent state. You can manage your infrastructure through declarative templates rather than scripts. Instead of PowerShell, instead of this giant PowerShell script with a bunch of parameters, you just define it once.
And this is all integrated with some sort of CI? In other words,
I don't have CI. You generally don't deploy an environment as part of a application release.
This would be more of like a kind of like push button, like, okay, I have like a set of resources that I need for this application.
Yeah, we're going to deploy to prod. Pull out the template,
Right.
click deploy.
Right.
You now have a prod environment.
Okay, so it's the button 1 push before your button 2 deploy push.
Yep.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
This is,
There we go.
as an example, Elastic has a one button push template. So you just say like, I want Elastic, it'll allocate VM, and it'll install Kibana,
Yep.
Elasticsearch, and Logstash on there.
Yeah.
And but you don't have to install all of them. You can figure all that through the templates. I want this, I want this. Here's what I actually want to deploy.
Another good example of that is like dynamic CRM in Azure.
Hmm.
It actually deploys you like 2 VMs, a SQL server.
There you
Like
go.
that all
Yeah.
uses Azure resource
It's
templates.
the whole SVS.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The only reason I asked was because you say you can repeatedly deploy your solution throughout the development lifecycle.
Mhm.
To me, CI would also include a script that goes and says, is that there, that there, that there, that there, that there.
Sure.
Yeah.
Basically says, oh, the SQL server's gone. Spool it up.
Yeah, that is a possibility. I mean, there is a PowerShell script, ironically, that deploys this template. So you could,
What?
So- yeah, you couldn't get away, but you could actually include it in Release Manager as part of a deployment. It's iterative, so if something's missing and you've already deployed the environment, it will figure out what's missing and deploy it.
Nice.
Yeah, it diffs it. So,
I'm around
And I-
liking PowerShell, and it's like, nah, you don't need it anymore.
and I
It's on
didn't.
Linux, though.
Yeah. I didn't check how accurate it was. Like if you rename something, is it going to lose it? But from my basic testing, it was doing a good job. So,
Cool. All right.
and then you can define dependencies between resources so they're deployed in the correct order. That's a really big one. One example is, so with Azure Web Apps, you can have connection strings and linked data servers. That's important. It's important to know that you need a SQL server first. So you define that as a dependent resource. It'll make sure the SQL server is created, then create the web app, and then create the connection strings automatically based on whatever was provided. So
Nice.
That's
pretty
really
awesome.
cool.
yeah. You can apply tags to resources to logically organize all the resources in your subscription. So if you have a really massive app, or if you decide to use resource groups in like a larger scenario where you have a lot of resources in them, you can also additionally tag them. So you can have even further identification of things that are grouped together inside of that. So it's like 3 or 4 levels of
Abstraction.
abstraction.
Yeah.
And then you can clarify billing for your organization by viewing rolled up costs for the entire group or for a group of resources sharing the same tag.
Nice.
So this
Yeah.
is kind of the,
By tag.
By tag.
Nice.
By resource
Yeah.
group, tag, or subscription.
Just inheritance and polymorphism.
this is more, yeah, exactly. That's right, yeah. This is kind of an advanced use case, but you know, you mentioned that you can have like a certain order, like a precedence of how I deploy resources.
Yeah.
Imagine that I have a VM, actually. I'm going to deploy a VM, I'm going to deploy an app to a VM. Let's say, because I have multiple things around this VM and I want to manage it.
Yep.
But let's say that I want to, I'm going to have to spin up a SQL instance. Well, that's easy. We'll just say, I have to spin up an Azure SQL instance, right? But then obviously I'm going to need to know the connection string to get to that resource. Is there a way to kind of script it so that's like, okay, deploy this resource, generate a connection string, and then apply that to the VM?
You just said that. That's what it does, right?
Not with the VMs.
No,
Sorry.
that's
I haven't-
SQL.
yeah.
Your own
Right.
SQL
Azure
internal?
SQL.
This is Azure
See,
SQL.
Azure
that's the problem right there.
Yeah, I haven't looked at VMs. I don't know if VMs, if VM lets you set environment configuration.
Yeah.
If that is the case, then it will be able to pull it.
Right.
With web apps, it's a lot easier because they automatically override your web config and your app
Exactly,
config.
Azure SQL is a special beast though, because there's a backing VM. It's no different than the IS solution.
Well-
It's just they take care of a lot of the management.
Well, the
Yeah.
more important part about that was the connection,
configure,
getting the
exactly.
connection string to an app inside of a VM.
Exactly.
Right, I get that.
It's more about the operations thing. I want to actually like allocate a resource, and then I want to get information about the resource I allocated and be able to kind of throw that down like the chain. Right?
Interrogate it and say,
Yeah.
hey, give me your connection properties.
It's,
Yeah.
it's a licensing issue, really.
Stop that.
It might be a good thing to look up afterwards to see
Yeah.
if Azure can set environment variables for VMs.
That would be.
Because if that's the case,
Cool.
you already have the connection string. It's just a matter of getting it to the app.
I'm pretty sure it can. Because Azure deals in that with web apps. You can set environment variables on the web app.
Yeah, but that's different. You're directly affecting a web app,
Exactly.
which is closer to an IIS application versus a VM, which is a much higher level.
I get that.
Yes.
But without going through PowerShell, was that the caveat?
Oh, sure.
Because I know you
Well-
can in PowerShell.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, in PowerShell, I would imagine this would be a lot. That
you do anything.
I think
PowerShell,
that
of
would
course.
be.
Yeah, but it's not as dynamic. So you're not really using
Oh.
PowerShell with these templates.
Right.
I would.
The dynamic
That's what I'm saying. Is
Yeah.
I knew there was some sort of like minor like scripting or something, just kind of propagate that with the template. I'm looking for the one button deploy, like
Yeah.
just push this button,
Yes.
you get an environment.
And that's
Yeah.
why they want you to use all the services.
Yeah, go out
Yeah,
and script.
yeah.
Yeah,
Use-
like 2025,
PAS.
they stopped selling SQL or shrink wrapped altogether, you know, and
Oh, yeah.
only Azure, because that should be the plan ultimately.
Easier to
So
scale.
That'll solve your problem.
All right,
You'll be
that's
able to do
perfect.
it.
All right, I'm sorry. He wants a one-button solution. Go out and
Yeah,
script that.
no more setup exe.
So as it comes from Microsoft, the guidance is really 4 steps. So define and deploy your infrastructure through declarative syntax in templates rather than using imperative commands. Define all deployment and configuration steps in the template. You should have no manual steps for setting up your solution.
Compositional. Composition.
Run imperative commands to manage your resources, such as start or stop an app or machine. And arrange resources with the same life cycle in your resource group. Use tags for all other organizing of resources.
Yes, straightforward.
Yeah.
So the template configuration itself is actually really simple.
Jason.
JSON, yeah. We care more about content than the schema.
Yes.
Microsoft has great IntelliSense for this, including like changes that are based on API versions. If you select a specific API version, your resources will only have options available for that specific version. So it makes it a lot easier to work with stuff. So yeah, content version, what's your API? Your parameters, what kind of inputs are you taking? Actually, parameters versus variables. I forget the difference between those two. In fact, I didn't use variables in anything, so it might just...
I imagine parameters would be like something that you could provide an argument to, and variables might be like
Persistent.
something that you could like set and forget.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's our current version of MS Code? I don't know.
12?
14?
Yeah, no. Oh, it might be
I'm sure
14.
it's out there.
Yeah,
Is C#6 is 14, I think?
I
Yes.
keep thinking
Yeah.
6, but that's open source.
Or 7.
Is that is next?
7.
Sorry.
So when you say content version, is that the version for the Azure resource template version, or is that like our internal API?
That's our internal version.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what were you saying about like selecting like what things are available to you through the schema?
I'll show you that in the demo here.
So I assume when you start typing into the dictionary, like your resources, it'll know the enums or something?
There are enums, so you'll have objects that are your dependent resources, and then after you type the API version, types will start populating.
Okay.
It's like
Everything.
an XSD based off that schema.
Based off that schema, yeah.
That is so
Yeah, Visual
cool.
Studio is super smart about it.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
As long as we use Visual Studio.
The
Right?
real
Yeah.
Notepad doesn't-
Actually,
VS Code now.
VS Code will know.
There you go.
VS Code will know too.
That's all
Yeah.
that matters.
All right. Cool. Yeah, that's all that matters.
Question.
In VS Code, we have available the intelligence and all for the station.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, VS Code is probably in Atom also.
Yeah.
But don't use Atom. Use VS Code. Yeah.
We need any extension for
Let's never
that?
talk about that.
I don't think so. VS Code has built-in JSON parsing, and it grabs that schema, and that's how it knows. Yeah.
Pretty smart about that.
Adam's
So this-
spell.
This schema right here.
No, I'm wondering. Yeah. So basically, all I need is this schema, and the rest of the intelligence will come for me.
Yep. Yeah, it's all there for
We're
you.
waiting for that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
Close enough.
we can continue.
Okay.
That's awesome.
So now
So cool.
we are on to demo time.
Okay,
Woohoo!
so what's up with that ending pound sign?
What?
Did you notice that in the schema?
Oh, I don't know.
It starts up with a
Yeah, I
dollar and
saw
ends
it.
with a pound sign.
Yeah,
Like,
Well, I think the dollar. I thought the dollar was for the key for schema.
okay.
I think it's just
And the
a
pound sign is.
section
There you go.
in there.
Yeah, there
I
it
don't
is.
know.
Yeah, you get that pound at the end.
Yeah, it doesn't. It seems
Component
superfluous,
template
but,
JSON.
Don't know.
So
Okay, here we
this
are.
is an example of what we use to deploy to Helix. So content version, we're on 1.0. I probably should have iterated better because we're probably closer to
No,
like
just stay there.
1.7.
Just stay there for a while.
But-
It's good.
I got a question, but finish.
Okay, so parameters. So we only really have to take in 2 parameters for what we do. So we have client, which is free text, and then environment, which is an enum. And so for all of the applications / resources that we deploy, we're going to take a combo of client name dash or maybe space, or not space, but client name, resource type dash environment. So in every environment, all the names are unique. It's really easy to work with.
This is really cool.
I can zoom in on
Is
this.
any of that injectable?
Yes.
Like the version number, content version number, the
Content version-
machine names or the resource names.
Well, I'll show you in a
It's on
second here.
file. Why
I'll
couldn't
show you.
Wait.
So
Getting ahead of the guy.
our first item here, application insights rules, application insights itself, more application insights. Let me get down to the other ones. We use a lot of applications insights. SQL Server. Here's a SQL Server. A SQL database. And then, depends on, it has to map back to that SQL server you've created. You need firewall rules, make sure your apps can actually reach it.
Access it, right?
Yeah.
Firewall rules are required for Azure SQL.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
You need a server farm. So the server farm is really only there for SQL, I believe. Let's
What,
see.
for failover?
Oh no, this is for your service. This is your app service plan.
Oh, okay.
So it's by default, it's just the basic F1.
Right.
I've seen some templates where based on the environment, it'll change what service tier you're on for your farm. So prod will automatically be in like standard, like an S1.
Right.
For beta environments, we only need the free one
Right.
just for smoke
Little
testing and
guy,
stuff.
right.
Yeah.
So they've got like this. I mean, it's not really. It looks like they're either like they have their own like little simple DSL in there for like grabbing parameters, or it's just JavaScript. And if either of those cases, they're a reference for this. That
Yes, they have a page that specifically talks about all the functions that are available. They have, I think, 10 or 15 string manipulation ones. They have 8 number manipulation ones. They can do calculations and stuff. The ones that I used the most were concat, parameters, stuff
know,
like
yeah.
that. Yeah.
I'm wondering if maybe that's what variables. I would get maybe. I mean, my guess would be like
if I'm repeating the same thing over, I'm concatenating the same things together over and over and over. Maybe that's the variable section. Maybe that's what that's for, just to like say like, hey,
Say at
like,
the top.
You can specify variables. All of these have outputs, so you could have something that builds it.
How very expat of you.
Oh.
So
Just saying.
here's a great example of like resources. So we have a connection string for our web app, and this just refers to the SQL server to get what its name is going to be, its URL, stuff like that.
So bad. So bad.
So yeah, and then so that's all the sites. And so if you want to deploy this, super easy.
Who needs IT?
Exactly. DevOps is here.
Damn right.
So new deployment. And so if we select an account, and then you select your subscription, and then I can create a new resource group. I'll do demo. Actually, I created it already. So we have our deployment template and our parameters file. There's a default one. So you could have a parameters file for, say if it was much larger, ours is only two items because I wanted to make it as simple as possible. You could have one for each client. Say you have a massive multi-tenant application that's deployed on a bunch of different servers. You could have one parameters file for each client and just loop through your script.
so wait, so the parameters file will be the actual values that we're injecting?
Yeah, so in our case, our client name is demo, our environment, we're gonna do a beta deploy. So we save and now we hit deploy.
Is there because I feel like I saw in Azure, like an actual like in Azure portal.
You can do this in the portal too. Yeah.
Have you done that, and can you show us a demo of deploying that?
Yeah, I can do that.
That'd be awesome.
So this all works with AWS, right?
Yes. Actually, AWS had this first.
Yes, but not as cool.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
AWS
cloud
had this-
formation.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
AWS had this first as a common sentiment, I think.
Yeah.
Right.
So let me go into our Azure portal here.
So is Microsoft made it cool.
Come on, Windows came from Xerox.
By way of Apple.
That was like a great argument.
Hey, what's up? You have a question?
Yeah. I have one question related to the IS level setting.
Okay.
So basically when we do deployment on the IS server, so sometimes we mention MIME types for particular things, right?
Yes.
So how those settings are handled in Azure deployment?
For what kind of resources? Are you talking about like web apps or?
Or we have to mention somewhere let's say fonts in web apps.
Like what in web apps? What was that? Sorry.
Sorry?
What in web apps?
I said fonts in web apps, font files, and static MIME types.
Oh, okay. So fonts actually have to be served with your application. That's not something that you can really do in a web app without including it in your content. So it wouldn't be really included in your Azure template.
Go by way of CSS, right?
Yeah. Web fonts.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine that what we're kind of looking at here is more about like infrastructure. It's less about the actual content of the application and more about the things that need to be there for your application to run. So
Yeah.
For you to deploy.
So yeah, exactly. So I think for any sort of like content or configuration changes you have on the application, that's just going to be a separate concern.
Yeah. So yeah, the older way, I know in some of our older applications, we used to install fonts on the server itself, and then the application would just have access to it. The newer approach is to either convert it to a web font or refer to some, or package your font with your application and refer to that. So let me show you guys the Azure portal here. So if you look at the demo resource group, this is what we just created. And now all of those resources that were in our template are already deployed. And so you can see resource costs for all of this. So you can see it per resource. So right now we're at 0. We haven't done anything with it, but and then deployments. So you can see when you deployed it, what changed, what was the status of each of those items. And then redeploy, you can view the template, you can export it, and then save it, modify it, do whatever you need. So let's just show really quickly deploying a new resource group from the portal.
Okay, so once you have this group deployed, then you have to deploy your app, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So you'll either use resource manage or release management in VSTS or whatever is your preference to get it to this.
Is there any way to concatenate them?
That would be nice.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Chris, for example, assume that we have a bunch of API that we're going to deploy. So each API should have its own build definition in order to, to work with this deployment.
So you'll have, if your APIs are all part of the same project, you'll have one build definition, and it'll have, say you're doing like a microservices approach, each of your API applications is going to have its own web deploy package. And then your release is really going to be doing all the separate deploys to these applications. One way that I'm thinking of right now, just off the top of my head, that you can actually do infrastructure and release all in one. Web apps allow you to link to VSTS source control. So you can actually automate that whole process, I think, if you link it.
The spool up and the deploy.
Yeah.
We're looking at it's the same exact things that you basically just create like a service principal.
Yeah.
And just set up your web apps, and you can say like, just deploy to these resources.
Yeah.
It's pretty straight. It's really, really straightforward. It's literally like, what's my subscription? What's like the resource I want to deploy to? You add a build, you add a release task, and it's like, boom, you deploy it.
It's almost front page, what is it, the old front page extensions,
Yeah.
where everything was automated when you want to publish a web app or a website.
Well,
but this is kind of the same thing, but it's kind of all grown up now.
Yeah. Again, I think we have to like still like separate the two in terms of like, this is allocating the web app. Then there's still the matter of actually deploying to that resource.
Right.
So
Yeah.
anyways,
But that's kind of the same thing.
Well, if you're experimenting with API changes and your source code at the same time, that's the only way. Otherwise, you go to the same. You got to deploy twice everything.
As a developer, yeah, that's great because you want quick deployment
Yes.
turnaround. Whereas if you're a big shop and you have formal CI, you may want to automate that, but it's obviously going to take more steps and more oversight, and there's going to be two discrete steps. Provision. Is a provision, deploy.
Yeah, it's not the biggest issue because most of this is going to be flushed out in your dev process.
Right.
So you'll have a release configured by the end of dev. You'll have a template configured by the end of dev. When you want to move to a different environment, you now just push that template to the new environment.
Right.
And now your your release management template, you can just parameterize it using the same kinds of parameters we did here, client name and environment name, and just plug that into Release Manager, and now you've deployed everything to that instead.
And Chris, am I right in thinking that like you probably will only run these templates, like deploy these templates maybe 2 times in the development cycle? One where you're creating a new environment, and 2 when you're changing settings for an environment.
Yeah, ideally you've flushed out all your requirements in the beginning of the project. You kind of have an idea of what your infrastructure is going to look like.
And in that case, you're saying, okay, I'm going to run it once to get a dev, then maybe a stage, and then now I'm actually ready to deploy a prod environment. But then let's say like, okay, I need to add Elasticsearch.
Yep.
Okay. So I need to add Elasticsearch. I go back, modify the template, and then deploy it to each of those environments. And this should pick up the differences and say, hey, I just need to deploy Elasticsearch to each of these. And then you can go forward. And so really, I feel like this is something that you do very infrequently, but when you need to allocate a new environment, this is extremely handy. That's my interpretation.
Yeah, because you just saw we deployed that entire environment. We deployed
amazing,
3 websites, SQL Server, and all the application insights. It took 30 seconds.
And now you could go to VSTS and hook it up to like to these resources and go boom. Okay, just go deploy to this new environment. Is there a way to target? Excuse me. I mean, what would be the right way to? So let's say for example you're in VSTS, you already have release definitions. Right? Yeah. You have something for your existing environment. Let's say that we just deployed Sage. We already had dev. We just deployed Sage right now. So what do? Do you create a new release definition and just clone existing?
You can actually. So assuming that your source is same throughout your promotion cycle, you can your first environment will exist in Release Manager. And then you can actually copy that environment, and now you've linked your Azure subscription / resource group to VSTS, You just update those settings, and now your deployment's going to be the same. You're just updating variables.
So if I copy the environment though, can I point it at a different branch and source?
No, that would be a different release.
Got it. So
Releases can only be linked to one build.
That's what I figured. Okay, so this is a better example would be we just deployed prod. We already had stage.
Yep.
It's going to be the same code.
It's just going to be promotion of the code.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
What about if there's a discrepancy? So you deploy, then you manually go in Azure and you make changes. You add Elasticsearch, you change the size of things, and then you make an update in your template and you redeploy it. What happens when there's a difference?
It's not going to delete it. I've seen that.
You don't lose data.
Yeah, ideally you don't want to take that approach because you won't get that repeatability in your
Will
other
it complain
environments.
and tell you these are the differences?
No.
Oh, it just fails.
It'll succeed.
Oh,
It
looks
just
like
won't
allocated.
delete your new one.
okay.
Yeah.
And so if the size is, let's say, smaller than what you already have allocated, it just won't do it?
I don't think okay, so I haven't looked at that scenario. If you update your say app service to like a standard and you redeploy to like a free, I don't know if it drops your resource down to free. I'm not sure on that one.
Okay, cool.
So I'll have to research that. More notes for me. So back to what you guys asked about. So doing a template deployment from Azure, you just search up resource template, and now you can do a new template deployment. So what you have to do is you add a template file. So you can, so you just copy in your JSON, you copy in your parameters, and then you select your subscription, your resource group. It's the exact same thing. You're just doing it from the portal.
So is this saved for future deployments? Is this like saved on like the dashboard for future deployments?
So you'll have your resource group. Now that you have your resource group, you can actually download the template for it.
Oh, cool.
So from here,
Retroactively get your JSON.
yeah.
Well, yeah, but I'm just thinking like, let's say I want like that push button deployment, right? Like in this case, I still have to download this and then go back and do like a template deployment and then just basically kind of like copy and paste this into that deployment. Is there any way basically to say like, I want to create this thing and save it?
Yeah, so we've created it. Now we can say add to library, and we'll have a saved library of templates that we can keep redeploying from the portal.
Okay.
So awesome.
So how would you theoretically, how would you make this public? Like something like we've seen Elastic do.
So Azure, in the Azure Marketplace, you can become a vendor in that, and you just upload your template, and that's how that works.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you're providing some sort of solution, this is how you would do it.
All right. I'm fully convinced this is a great solution.
Sweet. All right, so that's kind of it for my demo and presentation. If you guys have more questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Awesome.
No,
Thank
really
you
ask
so
questions.
much.
Yeah.
We were before.
No.
Yeah.
Don't hold back. It was so simple earlier.
Chris?
Yeah.
I still have the question. So I see that this template, when you deploy the entire application, it deploys everything in one shot. But what if from the microservice standpoint? So let's say we have a bunch of API, and we only want to deploy only 2 APIs. So other APIs have not been changed. So we want to just deploy 2 APIs. So how is this scenario will work?
It just does a diff. So if your template is for 6 services and you add 2 more, when you deploy, it's just going to deploy those 2 new services.
So it does not deploy other services?
It won't redeploy them. There's no need. They're already created. So what's there will maintain.
Yeah, and
It's not deploying the actual services, right?
No,
it's
it's
creating
No, yeah.
infrastructure. I think maybe that's the.
Yeah, it's just really updating the template that exists in Azure.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm just curious, when you started this template, did you manually do it and then do the JSON?
No, I
Yeah.
actually exported the entire environment, but I found that was actually more annoying than starting fresh. The biggest issue is that when you export it, Azure will create like 30 or 40 variables, and a lot of it you really don't need. Because when you create things from the portal, it's going to create a bunch of GUIDs, everything's unique, so nothing's really, it doesn't make sense. So when you go into something like this, I cut it down from 30 to 2 that I really cared about, and then you just build everything else from that.
So something this might be honestly like a little bit different because you already have like a parameters file. But something I've seen on the marketplace was that these templates, like when you release it on the marketplace and you include that in your Azure subscription,
Comes a UI.
you get a UI.
Yep.
With buttons and text fields and all that stuff to actually fill in those parameters.
Yeah.
So is that available if we don't publish the marketplace?
I don't think so.
What's your feeling having created this and used it? Do you think it's more convenient to use a parameters file, or would it be more convenient to have the UI in Azure?
I use the parameters file because it's so infrequent.
Yeah. So it's probably just fine just to use the parameters file.
Yeah, I mean so that nice UI that they give you and everything, it's really more for somebody who has no idea about your application. They don't really care.
Exactly.
All they know is they need Elasticsearch. Right. Give me some basics just so I can get it running.
But even then, like between environments, you really should only be changing parameters. Like that's So I mean, it's kind of like a similar thing. If you handed this to someone, you said, "Hey, don't touch anything outside the parameters." It should be pretty self-explanatory. What's the client? What's the environment? Change those values. Deploy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I see it. Okay. Cool. Sweet.
You have to go and remove a whole bunch of stuff because you reverse engineered the existing resource group. Yes. That's
yes. Yeah.
Oh, sounds a lot.
You're using Chrome.
Yeah.
I use Chrome.
You're using Chrome because Ian wants to know if you can use IE6.
That's right.
5.
AOL browser.
Windows 90 or what is that? Windows 98? Yeah.
Do ME. That's where it's at.
Oh, gross.
Yeah.
Between reboots, you can.
Right.
So one final thing here. I'm done with my demo resource group. I don't care about it anymore, so I'm just going to delete every resource associated to it.
Not the resource group, but the resources in it.
Well, the group and the resources.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so now it's going to go through. I found that SQL takes the longest. Usually takes about 5 minutes to be provisioned.
I was going to ask.
Yeah.
Does it do them in turn in reverse order of dependency?
Nope. It just nukes everything as it can.
Because you can't nuke the SQL VM before you nuke the database.
Oh, well, yeah.
You
Yeah.
would think.
I've run into that.
So, and
Just
then
think the whole damn thing.
if you see
Well,
deleting the
check your
resource group,
It's a shared VM or something.
just going to say it's in
No.
progress.
You can't get rid of
And
the server
things will
before
start
you get rid of the app
disappearing from
in-
this.
in Azure.
It's
So.
just a PhD or something.
All right. Any more questions, guys?
No.
It's like side channel, like a startup.
We're with developers. What?
All right. Try.
Any questions from the India team?
I hear crickets.
Hi, Chris.
And they all talk about
The question is related to the biotech specific. Can I ask?
Let me stop recording and then we can talk about it.